And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. Aquaba, welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Roster Report here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. Today is Making Money Fridays, and you know what we do when we get together with you on Fridays. We look at what is happening with our collective wealth, especially when we talk about our global wealth. We cannot ignore the African continent as a tremendous source of wealth. In fact, our program today, the paradox of the African wealth gap, is very serious. Today's date is Friday, the 16th of January, the year 2026. In the Western Gregorian calendar, this corresponds to the year 6266. In the calendar of ancient Kemet, to which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. And let me give you the program for today. I hope you find it to be fascinating. The bitter truth, the bitter paradox about Africa's wealth, especially looking at Central and East Africa, which the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, has GDP per capita amongst the poorest people in the world. But when it comes to the mineral wealth, there is no dispute that the Democratic Republic of the Congo, also known as the DRC, is the wealthiest piece of real estate of any nation on the planet. Welcome to Making Money Fridays. Africa's East African community is rich in resources, oil, minerals, fertile land. Yet its low GDP per capita, its log GDP per capita remains low. This paradox reveals a deeper challenge. Wealth beneath the ground isn't lifting people up above poverty. Join us today as we explore why resource abundance doesn't always mean economic prosperity or parity, and how governance, diversification, and innovation could turn natural wealth into shared growth across the region. So that is today's conversation. I'm going to begin with this short piece of video that I hope explains this situation. I'm going to add this to the stage. I'm going to mute my microphone, and then we're going to watch the video. So I'm going to go over here, increase the size of the video to fill the screen. I'm going to mute my mic, and let's listen to this short piece of video.
Have you ever wondered which continent is the poorest in the world? By the numbers, it's Africa, with an average GDP per capita of around $2,000. It's significantly lower than any other continent. For perspective, that's less than half of Asia's average and about 1/25 of North America's. This is often due to a mix of factors like conflict, infrastructure challenges, and a heavy reliance on basic agriculture in many regions. But here's a mind-blowing paradox. When you look at natural resources, Africa is arguably the richest continent on Earth. It holds about 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 40% of its gold, and huge amounts of cobalt, diamonds, and platinum. It even has 65% of the world's uncultivated arable land. So why the disconnect? It's often called the resource curse. Issues like corruption, historical exploitation, and exporting raw materials instead of finished goods have kept this immense wealth from benefiting the general population. It's a complex situation, but it highlights the incredible, untapped potential waiting to be unlocked. Thanks for watching.
All right, I'm going to unmute that right now, and I'm going to switch to another resource that I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit later in the program. So let me share this tab instead, And let me double check that. I see I have, yeah, the paradox of African wealth. In fact, let me just leave this on the screen while we talk about what is going on. I first of all want to say greetings to you, my listening audience, wherever you're tuned in from. We hope we are your favorite go to source for news and information, factual news and information about the African future that you and I imagine here every week here on LIB Radio, multiple times a week. We imagine this future. And you know something? The future, as we imagine it, is really quite great. No doubt whatsoever. So let's do the best we can to do the best we can and let everybody in the world know what this is all about. Now, I've got to do one more thing here real quickly. I've got to put this up on our X family. If you're watching on X, you will just get the, I'm just going to share just the link and the title of today's program. And real quickly, the bitter truth about Africa's wealth. And I'm going to share that real quick. And here we go. Now, I've got on the screen this image, which describes the paradox of African wealth, the bitter truth. And I'm not going to do the best of my abilities. I'm not going to do too much hyperbole. I'm going to do the best I can to keep things strict to what my research has shown. You know something? The research is actually quite encouraging. Now, get out of here. Okay, it did unlock. And it just went into deep sleep status. But put myself back on the table for right now. So I'm going to go back and delete much of the last 5 minutes from the audio stream so you don't have to listen to me sitting here talking to myself and about not much of anything. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to present a screen. Now it's still glitching. I'm going to share a screen. And the screen is the bitter truth about Africa's wealth. It's Google Notebook, LLM. And that's what we are sharing here. I'm going to add, okay, I'm going to add this. And this is what we were looking at when it glitched. The paradox of African wealth. Now that I have that up, I got to go back up here one more time to today's StreamYard and add this to the stage. I think I got it all done. Boy, you do understand how sometimes it can get really a little bit crazy around here. Let me do what I can do to close some of these extra windows. And let's go into the paradox of African wealth. All right. Now, this is done with Notebook LM. I got a note today from my brother, was it Stan? And Stan sent me a note. He said he was responding to my note that said that anyone in the listening audience who wants to get involved in the paradigm shift that we Africans across the diaspora are obligated to engage in, to turn this paradox, flip it 180 degrees. Anybody who wants to get involved, I am working with a number of people. And the thing about it is we have to dramatically increase our numbers. And it's going to be a long and detailed strategic program, just like my health for longevity program. It's a lot of key components to it, and it's going to take at least 20 to 25 years to put it all together. But if you want to join myself and Brother Stan and everybody else who's in this, don't be alone. Don't be isolated. Do not feel that you are unappreciated in this world. So join us, join us, join us. Text to me, 702-580-0662. Now, I am in this document. This is called The Paradox of African Wealth. And so let's go ahead and go into this document of the paradox. Let's turn some pages here. The paradox of African wealth from past dependence to value creation. A diagnostic analysis of the structural divergence between mineral endowment and macroeconomic development. So we can see the mineral endowment on the left-hand side, but the economic reality is the poorest countries in the world with the most poverty per capita are Africa. The Democratic Republic of the Congo and Somalia are two of the wealthiest resource countries. The DRC has all of the critical minerals needed to run a high-tech government, a high-tech nation. And Somalia has a coastline, the longest coastline on the African continent. And Somalia's coastline is being plundered by international thieves, polluters, and an effective theft of Somalia's destiny, while they call them, the thieves, call the Somali people pirates. Let's go forward. Let's talk about the structural divergence, the valuation gap. Geography is not destiny, but structural factors create vast disparities between resource-rich and service-oriented countries. Service-oriented meaning you're only servicing essentially, you're not producing. You're only servicing in your economy. The United States is such an economy to where the services become the GDP. And if we understand what that means they're not really producing anything. Let's go forward. Resource wealth versus economic reality, 2025 estimates. The country, the Seychelles, industry or focus, services, and tourism. Wealth metric GDP per capita, 42,110. That is a high income country. Next, look at Botswana. Diamonds and governance are the industry in focus. Wealth metric GDP per capita, $19,000.53. It's an upper middle income country. Guinea. Industry in focus, bauxite and iron. The wealth metric, national wealth per capita, $8,057. GDP per capita, $3,219. And the Democratic Republic of the Congo, cobalt, copper, coltan, everything. Net wealth, $24 trillion in the wealth metric, but GDP per capita, $686. The dual economy, a dynamic extractive sector, often operates independently of the domestic market, failing to translate subterranean assets into inclusive growth. And again, total natural resource wealth of the African continent, $6.2 trillion at least. But the GDP per capita, $7,860 versus a global average of $25,591. The mechanism of stagnation, the Dutch disease, and the resource curse. At the top of the circle is the resource boom. And I apologize to any of you. The computer is acting a little weird today, and I'm just going to do the best that I can with it. And we'll just keep going on from there, okay? So at the top of the circle, the resource boom. And then next on the circle, currency appreciation, which in Africa's case is currency depreciation. Non-resource exports are uncompetitive. And then you have a hollowed out economy. And it's a vicious circle, and it leads back into the top. We're talking about a case study. Look at Nigeria. The shock. 1950s oil discovery led to massive export earnings spike. The symptom? The collapse of the agricultural production center that had sustained Nigeria independently. They grew and ate their own food. The result? Poverty rose from 36% in 1970 to nearly 70% in 2000, despite the boom in oil. And the money was concentrated. The wealth was extracted. Billions and billions extracted annually. I'm talking about, looking at one chart, we can see $182 billion a year, and this chart is at least 10 years old, being extracted from Africa. Africa is not the poorest in the world. Africa is the richest in the world, but unfortunately, Africa has holes in its pockets, and it also has other people's hands deep in those pockets. The reliance on point source resources encourages rent seeking over broad-based taxation. Looking forward, and bear with me, it's a little bit creepy today. Okay, path dependence, the long shadow of colonial infrastructure. We're looking at Kenya and Ghana, interior to coast extraction lines. Those are the railways, the lines by which resources are being taken out. The logic of extraction. 90% of sub-Saharan lines were built up pre-independence to evacuate resources, not connect domestic markets. The Uganda Railway was built for strategic military control, crossing sparsely unpopulated buffer zones. The persistent effect? Even though after rails fell into disrepair, the cities they spawned persisted due to sunk investments, schools and hospitals, locking in an economic geography oriented toward external extraction. Now, the Chinese have been building these railways up through their road and belt initiatives of recent. I got a chance to travel from Nairobi to Mombasa along that new line. But unfortunately, still the Chinese built these up to continue the extraction. Now, their trade deals with the Africans do not leave the Africans as impoverished as they were before. But still, the Chinese are not doing what you and I, the diaspora Africans, know the African countries want. The African countries want not aid, they want trade. They want to build up their own. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has pledged to become the refining center of the continent. And African Americans, with a $1.93 trillion annual consumption rate, that is enough wealth to actually translate the consumption into production, go into the DRC, and in partnership with the DRC and the entire East African community to build up DRC's ambition to have these refineries refining Africa's natural resources. It's got to be done. It's got to be done. We have the opportunity to do it, and I pledge you, we need to do it sooner than later so we can retain as much of that wealth which is currently being extracted by the foreign powers. The governance gap. This is part of the problem. The biggest part of the problem is the governance gap. Corruption as a tax on resilience. 2024 Perceptions Index of Government Corruption. Rwanda said to be the highest in the region. I disagree. I personally think the Rwandan government is one of the best governments, but the problem is we're talking about the resource extraction, and Rwanda is currently recipient of this illicit resource trade from the DRC. It can be turned around with the right governance. The global average is considered to be 43. Sub-Saharan African average of corruption index is 33. The DRC perceived as 20, and Equatorial Guinea as 13%, or 13 points on this corrupt. So highly corrupt is 0, and very clean is 100. So I stand corrected. The perception of Rwanda has the highest of this index, meaning the least corruption. Inside corruption is a climate risk. Countries scoring below 50% for the majority of misused climate funds. Now, we're going to have some guests coming on with us next Wednesday that are going to offer a completely different perspective on this whole climate issue with these foreign NGOs operating in Kenya. And we're going to feature 2 researchers from the Elephant Group that are going to present a different picture on these NGOs. Corruption is obstructing effective climate action by hindering the adoption of ambitious policies. That from Transparency International 2025. We're going to pose this question to our guests, which I think are going to give us a different perspective. Let's go forward. The bleeding economy, illicit financial flows. Now, this is that 182 billion that is being torn out of Africa. This is a portion of it. This is resource wealth generated, retained value versus 89 billion annually from illicit financial flows. So these are people not paying their taxes, the misplaced investments in minerals, etc. The mechanics of loss. Here's the mechanics. Trade misinvoicing, understanding export values to conceal profits offshore. Understating export values to conceal profits offshore. Point 2, the gold standard. Gold accounts for 77% of extractive under invoicing. That's $30.8 billion annually. And next, transfer pricing. MNEs, and these are illicit mechanical trades, centralize operations in tax havens to erode African tax base. In the historical context, South Africa, iron misinvoicing from 2000 to 2014, $57 billion estimated loss. And they talk about corruption in Africa. But these are Western corporations that are engaging in this. I hope you do agree that this is undeniably a big problem from the African perspective. I challenge, are you in the house today? I would love to hear from you. If you are in the house, if you're hearing me, if you feel sympathetic with today's conversation, then make a response. Please do give us a response. I'm not seeing anybody in Rumble. You have not made a sound. Has anybody else hit the like button? No, nobody's hit the like button. But I do see you in the house. So we have to ask the question, what's going on? Can we do better than this? Let's continue our discussion. The geopolitics of infrastructure, deconstructing the Chinese engagement model, the perception, debt trap diplomacy, the same thing the West has been doing for decades. Since the early 1970s, the IMF and the World Bank have led African nations into debt traps. Now they are suggesting, and I'm not saying it's not true, that the Chinese are doing the same thing. Chinese firms bring their own labor, prisoners, and workers to Africa. And the perception is that the infrastructure that they are building in Africa is of low quality. The empirical evidence, resource for infrastructure. That's the barter models. Example given, Seco mines exchange mineral access for physical assets, filling a financial void Western lenders avoid. And then Western lenders, in avoiding that trade-off of minerals for development, the Western countries just came in and just plundered everything they could. IMF, the World Bank, and the corporations that followed them around the world. The labor reality, 89% of workforce in surveyed Chinese firms is African. The source from Sun T et al. However, management remains 66% Chinese. And that's where we as Afri-Amirs can give the African cousins a better deal. Better deal. We will not retain all the management. We will train the next 2 generations or more of managerial leaders to follow our entry. There's going to be plenty of work for our managers to do. The enclave problem. Mines create local activity, night lights, but often lack backward linkages to the broader local economy. So the key takeaway here, Chinese finance fills the infrastructure gap, some $68 to $108 billion annual deficit, but prioritizes speed over environmental and social standards. And speed we need, no doubt. But the environmental, Chinese have a large disrespect for the environment. Africa's environment is largely pristine. Now, Africa's got problems with the environment. I went to Tema in Ghana, a fishing village in Ghana, and I looked over the edge of the docks into the water, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting. Africans are going to have a much better attitude to sustain its natural resources, especially its blue water resources. It's going to have a much better attitude than it currently has. Or as they say, a decade ago when I went to Tema, I have not been back since, but I do plan to go there again. We're going forward. Editorial Economic Intelligence is the source. The Green Pivot, Africa's role in the 2025 critical minerals race. The Green Pivot. Market context, the net zero transition requires a 10-time increase in lithium and a 3-fold increase in cobalt by 2050. 10-fold increase in lithium, which is currently mined largely in eastern Congo and across eastern Africa. And then Zimbabwe, a big source of lithium in the world. Market value projection growing from 8.8 trillion to 46 trillion dollars. African Americans How much of that $46 trillion, which would represent an 8 trillion or $9 trillion increase, how much of that, well, not a 9 trillion, that's 46 minus 9 trillion, that would represent about a 36% or $36 trillion increase. How much of that 36 trillion does your plan capture? Strategic asset, Africa holds 30% of the world's proven critical green minerals. 30%. But if we look at GDP, $681 per person versus 25,000 for the world, we can certainly do better, undeniably. Going forward, from extraction to industrialization, the value addition imperative. The African value chain. Africa supplies 12% of global mineral exports, but captures only 4% of the value. And this is unfortunately where it's going. Excuse me. It talks about extraction, selling raw ore, the lowest value capture. The beneficiation, smelting, and refining would be the first major step we take towards recapturing the value of our own. Next comes manufacturing, battery precursors and cathodes, very high value, and assembling our own EVs and the technology, that is the highest value. So therefore, we're going to have to mobilize, identify, then mobilize our engineers and direct them to Africa's mineral resources. And we're going to take the responsibility for investing in filling in the gap. We have got to take responsibility for building refineries, smelting, battery manufacturing, cathodes, and ultimately assembling the world's greatest legacy of electric vehicles and technology. Currently, the Chinese are amazing. They're defeating Europe and America. That's to be appreciated. But Africans hold the resources by which the Chinese are empowering their industrial might. Strategy, the African Green Minerals Strategy, AGMS, to stop exporting dirt, enforce local processing to capture $16 trillion in potential revenue. $16 trillion. Think about that number. The blueprint for success. The DRC Zambia battery value chain. This is we see the Democratic Republic of the Congo in the Great Lakes region, the eastern part. And we see Zambia, which the U.S. is now investing in a $5.5 billion railway, or $5.1 billion railway to Lusaka, the capital of Zambia, between there and Luanda, the capital of Angola, which is on the West African coast. Why is the U.S. building that railway? It's an extractive line. It wants to get trains into Zambia and load them up with copper and cobalt and other resources and extract them. So the initiative, a joint agreement to establish SEZs. These are special economic zones dedicated to producing battery precursors and EV components. Unlock the $46 trillion global market, the 2050 estimate. Strengthen the African continental free trade area by creating regional value chains. I know you're hearing me. I know you're hearing me. I got to confirm that you're listening today, because I'm excited over here, but I'm also a little frustrated that I'm not hearing anything from my listening audience at all. Nobody talking to me And you cannot be so disconnected and uninterested in what is happening on the African continent. There's nowhere in the world that our audience is just this disinterested. So I'm double checking, making sure I'm not missing anyone. I do see 3 of us on YouTube have hit the thumbs up. So it means I'm not alone, but I'm not hearing anything from you. I'm going to go forward. We're going to continue. We're talking today about the bitter paradox regarding East Africa's wealth or lack thereof. Let's continue. Blueprint for success. So we're talking about the AFCFTA. And you've heard me say for 3 years now, the AFCFTA was implemented at the beginning of 2021. Yet, unfortunately, African Americans aren't talking about that. Very rarely do any of us talk about it. We can do better than that. Beating the curse. Botswana's governance model, and Botswana is undeniably a country we should be looking towards, not only for their economic policies and strategies to make the Botswanans wealthy, but Botswana's leadership. It's guided by a very visionary woman. I don't have her name right now. Let me see if I can get her name real quick. Who is the president? Is the president of Botswana? Because she is awesome. We really should be paying very, very careful attention. The president of Botswana is not a she. I'm thinking of the prime minister. The president of Botswana is the head of state, and his name is the president of Botswana is Duma Boko, who has been in office since November 1st, 2024. I'm thinking of Namibia. He is the 6th president of the country and the leader of the Umbrella for Domestic Change Party. And we really should be paying much closer attention to our brother. Now, let me just double check. Prime Minister I'm thinking of the woman Prime Minister, who is the Prime Minister of Botswana, and it doesn't have a Prime Minister. It's not parliamentary, so it's based upon another model. And I'm thinking of Namibia. Who is the president of Namibia? Not Nabia. Sound like Donald Trump. Namibia. The president of Namibia is... let me just stop fooling around. Who is the president? President. President of Namibia is, I think it's a woman. Yes. President of Namibia is Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa. Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa, who has been in office since March 21st, 2025. She's the first female president of the country. And the sister is pretty awesome. She is. We really should be paying much closer attention to this beautiful sister. And she's powerful too. I got her in my face. Let me just copy this link. Copy link address. And I'm going to cut and paste this up into the Rumble for my Rumble family. I'm going to paste it up for my Facebook family as well. And I'm going to paste this up one more time for the YouTube family. And bear with me. This is well worth waiting for while I'm trying to figure out which desk this is on. Who is the president of YouTube? No, not the president of YouTube. The president of Namibia. She's a bad sister. She really is. And that's good. So we're almost at the end of this discussion, talking about this resource curse about Africa. And we're almost at the end of our panel here. And this the sleeping giant. The Democratic Republic of the Congo's multi-sector potential, moving beyond instability to a diversified economy, hydropower, agriculture, forestry. In hydropower, you have now the reality of the Inga Dam project, Africa's largest hydroelectric power, 100,000 megawatt generation, enough to supply a significant portion of the continent with low cost, clean, renewable energy. In agriculture, 80 million hectares, and a hectare is 2.4 acres of arable land, 90% undeveloped, potential to feed 2 billion people as Africa's breadbasket. And according to my book, The Blackest Soil, Africa Can Feed the World, Africa literally has the context to develop, if it developed organically, completely, has the ability to feed 12.9 billion people around the planet a daily diet of 2,000 calories. Why is Africa importing food? It can feed the entire world. The only reason it's doing so is because you and I are not involved. And in forestry, the African Amazon carbon sink, worth potentially $900 million per year in carbon credits. But the carbon selling, African countries selling carbon credits is a bit tricky. Instead of selling carbon credits, we need to be trading those carbon credits for infrastructure. Africa needs smelting. Africa needs mining. Africa needs to build its own industrial plants and manufacture. So let's not trade carbon credits for money. We got to trade those carbon credits for infrastructure, for manufacturing. The new scramble, Western re-engagement, as if they ever disengaged. From aid to strategic investment, Africa needs trade, not aid. Strategic competition, the US-EU view critical minerals as national security assets to break reliance on Chinese supply chains. There's that railroad I was talking about from Lobito in Angola, and I thought it was Luanda, but it's Lobito. The railway cuts through the Democratic Republic of the Congo and goes into northern Zambia. That railway is intended to be extraction model. Cobalt metals, backed by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, investing in Manono lithium deposit in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The shift, high-tech exploration and responsible sourcing as a counter offer to the barter model. This competition provides agency. African governments can now demand technology transfer and local processing. They can, but they're going to have to, it's going to be a battle. We're going to have to get involved. And that takes you to, near the end, strategic imperatives for structural transformation. 1, 2, 3. Number 1, digital governments. Digitize mining licenses and export tracking. That's where the, blockchain coding comes into impact. Until we can put together a team of diaspora blockchain coders, then the full force of the African continental free trade area will not be available to us. We've got to encode the blockchain, digital governance, close the information asymmetry that fuels the $89 billion annual IFF loss. Number 2, infrastructure integration. We're going to shift from colonial interior to coast extraction lines to regional development corridors, LAPSAT, which would include Lobito, that facilitate intra-African trade. And number 3, enforce beneficiation. Legislative mandates for local processing. ban raw ore exports to force the development of manufacturing capacity. 1, 2, 3. Conclusion: geology is potential, policy is destiny. The paradox of $24 trillion in wealth coexisting with the world's most concentrated poverty is a result of historical path dependence and government failures. The green transition is the window of opportunity. Africa must position itself not as the mine of the world, but as the manufacturer of the future. Africa must position itself not as the mine of the world, but as the manufacturer of the future. Now, I hope you did enjoy that presentation. I'm going to come out of this right now, stop sharing. And I have a lot of other research that's on the table, but I'm going to kind of come out of this research because I have like 10 or 12 articles in the background where much of this came from. But the problem is I'm not hearing from anyone today. So I'm kind of reluctant to continue with this conversation. I am using this, I'm using Notebook LM. And you have heard me, I've been using Notebook LM for just over 2 weeks. When we together discovered Notebook LM during our 28-week long study course on AI for managers. And I've only heard from one other person. Actually, I've heard from 2 other people that were using Notebook LM. Now, one of the persons didn't understand it, but he had a piece of video, and I could immediately tell when I saw it, it was created by Notebook LM. And I was impressed. There's one other person that's talking about he had discovered it from listening to LIB radio. And now he's using Notebook LM. Personally, I think it's great. I think Notebook LM is absolutely fantastic. Now, here's what I'm going to do. Put this up. I have this already. Area here. And that's not what I want to put in there. I wanted to put in some of these other links. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to close this. And I have some other things that I have up on the screen. But I'm going to create a video out of what I just produced using Notebook LM. I went into customize with video overview. I'm looking for not a brief video, even though I could. Let me put up a bite-sized one first. That'll go much quicker. And I'm just going to auto select the visual style. And now it is generating a short video. And at the same time, these are generating online. And you know that AI is taking up a huge amount of resources nowadays. So I'm one of the people taxing it. But I'm going to put up a longer video over here and put it up in retro. I'm going to put it up in heritage. I kind of like heritage the way it looks. And what should it focus on? An overview. An overview of the African wealth versus resource paradox. That wealth is measured in GDP per capita, in GDP / per capita versus resources paradox. So that's a video I'm going to be generating, and it's going to talk about all these problems. In fact, I have a list of things that I had prepared to talk about for today. The following list details the top 10 sources most frequently cited across the provided research documents, reflecting their importance in providing data, policy frameworks, and economic analysis regarding African development and mineral resources. Number one, the World Bank Group. Number two, the International Monetary Fund. Number three, United Nations, CTAD, and UNECA, various United Nations bodies, particularly United States Conference on Trade and Development, and the Economic Commission for Africa, the International Energy Agency, IEA, the African Union, central policy and resource and central political and policy source for continental strategies, particularly the African Mining Vision and the African Green Minerals Strategy. The U.S. Geological Survey. Number seven, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. That's serving European nations, including America. The African Development Bank, source number 8. Number 9, Transparency International. And number 10, Aid Data. So those are all sources used to create this. And let me just save this to the note. And on that, I'm going to begin to wrap it up. For today's research, I had a total of like 45 or 45 sources to find the information that I used today. This is why I like using Google's Notebook LM as much as I despise Google. It's the most powerful tool available to America, and it is being used by American corporations and Americans of all sorts to control, exploit, and utilize our people as batteries. You are nothing but digital data. If you do not compete, if you do not actively engage in the fight for your sovereignty and your freedom, then you are in the matrix. You are in the program. But you're only in the program written off as you're digitized and now exploited. Now, we've talked about this. We'll get more into this. Maybe next week we'll focus on how us all being turned into digital data dehumanizes us. The ultimate dehumanization, in my mind, is to be turned into digital data and just exploited. Everybody does it. Microsoft, Amazon, Oreo cookies, Subway sandwiches. They purport to want to feed you, but these companies are feeding you crap, and then the owners of these companies feeding you crap are also invested heavily in the medical services industries, insurance, medical instruments, testing, data, etc. Drugs, pharmaceutical drugs are heavily invested to not even clean up their mess, but to give the back end profitability off of EU eating pancakes, Oreo cookies, and buffalo wings. Now, that is an overarching conspiracy. I am the master of conspiracy theory writing. So on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in. There's a lot that I have on here on today's table. We talked about these sources for our information. I'm generating the video. I have an explainer over here. Did we use the explainer already? That was African development. And I think I did use that already. One sec. Oh, it's a video. Let me show you just the video before I go out. This is going to show up here. Export, and now go over here to StreamYard, and I'm going to share with you one more screen before we go forward. And this screen is the short video, The Bitter Truth About Africa's Wealth, and the audio is with it. I'm going to mute me as we go through this short piece of video, and it is going to explain what I've been explaining for the last 1 hour, and it's going to take just about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to mute myself, and let's go through to this video. I'll be right back with you.
All right, we're tackling a big puzzle today, the story of development across Africa.
Because here's the thing, there isn't just one story. It's way more complicated than that.
So we're going to break it down into 3 key pieces: governance, opportunity, and partnership. Okay, first up, governance. And we're going to look at Rwanda's incredible progress against corruption. This year, Rwanda hit its highest ever score on the Corruption Perceptions Index of 57.
And that score, it puts them at number 3 in all of sub-Saharan Africa.
Globally, they've jumped to 43rd place. That's some serious, consistent progress right there.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Just look at the difference compared to the regional average. So, how'd they do it? Well, experts say it's all about strong political will and zero tolerance.
All right, let's move to the next piece of the puzzle, opportunity. And this one is huge.
We're talking about the electric vehicle market. By 2050, it's going to be a $46 trillion industry.
And the DRC and Zambia are sitting on most of the world's key minerals for this revolution.
But this is bigger than just shipping out raw materials. The real goal is to build industries at home.
And for our last piece, partnership. This one's tricky, especially when we talk about China's role. You see, Chinese investment is kind of a double-edged sword. There are big benefits, but also big concerns.
On the one hand, it's a huge growth engine. It's building infrastructure and creating a ton of local jobs. But on the other hand, you've got serious issues with labor practices and environmental damage. So what makes the difference? Well, it boils down to the African governments themselves setting the terms. Okay, so let's put these 3 pieces, governance, opportunity, and partnership together. What do we see?
You get this dynamic picture: good governance, seizing future opportunities, and managing partnerships wisely.
So you see, there's no single story. It's a constantly evolving picture, shaped by all these forces. Which really leaves us with one big question. With all these pieces in play, what's the next chapter?
What is the next chapter? That's a great question to be left with. You and I have the ability to answer that question, but we have got to have a desire to be involved. We've got to have a desire to be on the front line, to be competitive, to play the game the way the game is currently structured. It's called game theory. Now, this Saturday, I had planned on beginning teaching a class on game theory. I may have the class on Friday nights. It's kind of hard because many times our people are more interested in basketball than competing to be the wealthiest people in the year 2050 in the world. You know where I'm interested. So I'm going to do the best I can to get you motivated, interested as well. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy at all. I'm looking at the likes for today. 3 likes total on YouTube. And when I look at Rumble, it appears for the first time in a long time that I had no viewers at all via Rumble. No one. You've been tuned into LIB Radio. I would say we aim to be your favorite, but at this point, we just aim to stay open. And it's kind of a shame, but it is what it is. We are where we are, and it's not looking very good for us who love Africa passionately and who wish to aim for a future in which that passion is shared amongst our extended family. But there is always hope. Don't give up hope. Do keep on point, because we have a lot to lose by quitting, and we have so much to gain by staying in the fight. I wish you all peace and prosperity on your favorite LIV radio, LIV TV. We are living in black.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.